Good afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on religion and society, in today's lecture we are going to discuss Sikhism and referring to the 5 symbols of Sikhism. This is a prescribed reading in BA Multidisciplinary second semester course on religion and society, and this forms the part unit 2 of the syllabus. We are going to refer to JPS Uberoi's article on 5 symbols of Sikhism. So, in the first half of the lecture, we try to understand the method of structural understanding of Sikhism. Second, we understood the 5 Ks, the way in which the binaries of the 5 Ks help us to do away with the duality of the religious and the secular. And then we talked about the initiation ceremony as an inversion of Hindu renunciation. Now we are going to further move on with the understanding of Sikhism as an inversion of Hindu renunciation. So, in his influential sociological study, JPS Uberoi interprets the 5 symbols of Sikhism or the 5 Ks as a structural ensemble that defines the Sikh identity as a structural inversion of Hinduism, specifically regarding the concept of renunciation. Uberoi argues that Sikhism rejected the Hindu Varna Ashram Dharma, that is the 4 stages of life. In traditional Hindu practice, a renouncer or a sannyasi would shave their head, that is do a mundan, to signify they are socially dead to the world. When we look into the 5 Ks of Sikhism, it directly tells us that we need not be kind of cut off from the everyday profane life to become sacred. So, the 5 Ks signifies that spiritual and temporal, that is material concerns, are inseparable. In simple word, the sacred and the profane or religious and secular can coexist. So, let us look into how he is trying to help us understand the 5 renunciation ceremony of the Sikhism as an anatonym of renunciation. So, the sannyasi rite often involved a symbolic funeral where the individual died for their family and caste. They would often shave their head completely, divestiture, to show no longer cared for the body or the social status. By making the unshorn hair a mandatory investiture, the Sikh initiation flipped this logic. The sannyasi saves to leave the society. On the other hand, the Sikh keeps hair to remain in society, but as a sovereign, disciplined warrior and a saint. The case, which is the unshorn hair, isn't just about growing hair. It is a rejection of the rejection. It says, I will not shave my head like a monk to find God. I will keep my hair as God gave it and find God while serving my community. So, you need not do anything other than what has been gifted to you by God. This is the belief of a true Sikh. Uberoi is showing that the Guru was a coding a new type of human. If the sannyasi was A and the worldly person was B, the Sikh was not A and not B. By keeping the hair, the Sikh simultaneously did the following. Number 1, opposed the sannyasi by not shaving or matting. Second, opposed the worldly by never trimming for fashion. So, Uberoi basically provides a vivid step-by-step breakdown of the sannyasi initiation, which serves as the thesis to which the Sikh Khalsa initiation is the antithesis. To understand the structural contrast, we have to look at the sannyasi rite as a process of social erasure. Every action in this ritual is designed to kill the candidate's previous identity so that they can be reborn as a non-person. So, there is complete erasure of your profane life in order to become a sacred or an ascetic. And that is why you kind of do everything which is opposite. So, the household and the sannyasi, there is nothing in common. They are completely opposed. So, if you are a householder, you would be trimming your hair, keeping, whereas if you are a sannyasi, you would be keeping long, unkept hair. So, the sannyasi ritual follows a ritual of systematic striping, divestiture, the ancestral debt. By performing shraddh or the funeral rites for his ancestor, the neophyte settles his account with the past. He no longer belongs to a lineage. So, you do all the rituals in order to be completely dead for the previous and take on entirely a new identity of a sannyasi. So, then there is an ultimate renunciation. He gives away all possession, he is no longer a player in the economy. Fourth is the physical striping. The mundan or shaving of the head, beard and mustache is the primary sign of losing one's worldly face. The fifth, the self funeral. Performing his own death rite, that is Atma Shraddh, is the most radical step. In the eyes of the Hindu law and society, an initiated sannyasi is legally dead. This is why they are buried like a corpse that has already been processed rather than cremated. And the final severance, throwing the sikha, that is scalp lock, and the sacred thread into the water signifies the end of his caste identity. He is no longer a Brahmin, Kshatriya or Vaishya, he is no one. So, you are completely into a different world. Now, if we compare the sannyasi renunciation with the Sikh initiation or the Sikh Khalsa rite of sovereignty, we see the contrast. So, basically JPS Uberoi is setting up a direct comparison between the Hindu sannyasi rituals, which is kind of giving us a negative manifestation, and the Sikh initiation, which is kind of more positive. So, how the items the sannyasi discards are mirrored by what the Sikh retains or receives. The first is the hair. So, if we look into the sannyasi's rite of renunciation, there is complete discarding of the hair. You totally shave off your hair and your any kind of hair on the body, and this signifies a complete social death and lack of vanity. If we compare this to the Sikh Khalsa sovereignty rite, they do not discard hair, they rather keep it, and the unshorn hair is the first symbol of Sikhism, which is the case, and it signifies vitality, power and the natural man. The second feature is identity. In the Sikh renunciation, the phrase is, I am no one. Once you become a sannyasi, you are no one, you don't have a caste, you don't have a family, you don't have a lineage. So, you sever all your ties with the family, caste, community. Whereas, in the Sikh initiation rite, the message is that you become a member of the Panth, and that is you enter a new disciplined brotherhood with a shared name, and that is a Singh or a Kaur for a male and a female respectively. The third is equipment. What equipments are kind of significant of a Hindu renunciation ritual, where the loincloth, the staff water vessels, the tools of a beggar, wanderer. So, these are some of the material or equipment that a sannyasi would carry with him or her. And in the Sikh initiation, the equipment are your kirpan, your kachera, kara, and all these are kind of a tools which is representing both the soldier and the householder. The fourth identity is of the world. So, when you become a sannyasi or you've done a renunciation rituals, then you exit. So, we were trying to discuss about the Sikh rituals, initiation ceremony as structural inversion of the sannyasi renunciation rite. So, JPS Uberoi in his study of the 5 symbols of Sikhism argues that Sikh initiation rituals is basically coming away from the idea that you need to take a complete death or you need to completely move out from your caste and community to become sacred. So, at one level, he compares the Hindu sannyasi rituals with the Sikhs initiation ceremony, and the second comparison that he does is with the Jogi or the Nath initiation. And the Jogis particularly are followers of Gorakhnath and represents a move from pure Brahminical renunciation towards a supernatural power and a body focused discipline. Unlike the sannyasi who seeks to become no one, the Kanpata Jogi is marked by the mudra, thick glass or bone rings. This requires the ritual piercing and the splitting of the ear cartilage. If the sannyasi uses saving to represent social death, the Jogi uses piercing to represent a permanent, painful departure from the normal world into a state of occult power. So, if we look into the comparison with the Jogi initiation, J.P. Uberoi says that there is a synthesis and a structural map of the body. While not mentioned in this specific paragraph, Jogi often let their hair become matted, jat, which stands in contrast to the sannyasi's 7 head and the Sikh's groomed case. So, we see a three-way comparison forming in the medieval Punjab. The first is the body, specifically the head and the ears, become a canvas for declaring one's relationship to society. The Sikh symbols were a total rejection of the ascetic model. In the eyes of the 17th century Punjabi, religious meant either saving your hair to become a sannyasi or splitting your ears and meeting your hair to become a jogi. Both paths required you leave your family and stop being a productive member of society. When Guru Gobind Singh commanded the Sikh to keep their hair long and not pierce the ears, he was essentially saying, and this is quoted from J.P.S. Uberoi's article, you can be as holy as a sannyasi and as disciplined as a jogi, but you will remain a father, a soldier, and a citizen. Your renunciation is not the world, but of the ego within the world. So, the jogi initiation is even more explicitly morbid than that of the sannyasi, because there is kind of a marker of pain on the body where the ears have to be pierced. So, it uses powerful signs to mark the end of a person's social existence, and some of the action which is taken in order to become a yogi. The first is the vow of poverty and passivity. The vows against trade, employment and weapon are direct negation of the householder and the warrior archetype. The second is the kafni or the shroud. Wearing a burial shroud as a daily garment is the ultimate symbol of being a living ghost. The third is ear piercing or the mudra. The transition for augur, probationer to nath or a master is marked by physical mutilation. In the structural sense, this breaks the body's natural integrity to signify a supernatural status. Now, when we do a structural inversion or do a comparison between the Sikh versus Jogi, the penalty for losing an earring being buried alive shows that the Jogi identity is entirely tied to this physical mark. So, you need to have this physical mark on your body to signify your identity. Without the ring, the socially dead person becomes literally dead. Uberoi's argument becomes crystal clear when we compare these Jogi rules to the Sikh Rehat Maryada or code of conduct. The Sikh initiation or the Amrit ritual takes these Jogi minus signs and flips them into plus signs. The mention of the Dadu Panthis adds a nuance. Even in a more moderate sect, the ritual of shaving the scalp lock or the sikha remains the pivotal act. The sikha was a last thread connecting a man to his caste and family. By cutting it, the Dadu Panthi, like the sannyas, sever his connection to the Brahminical social order. And what is the synthesis? That is, the Sikh initiation is giving us the third way. Uberoi is using this text to prove that the Sikh symbols were not chosen at random. They were sophisticated counterculture code. And the counterculture was first against the worldly. The Sikh keeps hair that is long, no vanity, no grooming for fashion. And then it is against the ascetic. The Sikh keeps their combed and covered, that is no wildness, no asses, no social death. By refusing to shave, denying the sannyasi, jogi, dadupanthi path and refusing to trim, denying the worldly path, the Sikh occupies the third space, and the third space is that of a sovereign householder. So, when he looks into the symbols, he does a unitary pair, and the first unitary pair, as already discussed, is that of the case and the kanga. And we look into the way in which he kind of makes it central to the understanding of Sikhism. So, his most brilliant insight is that the case or the unsewn hair cannot be understood without the kanga. It is a unity. In the structural grammar of the 18th century India, hair was a sign of one's relationship to social order, and therefore it had multiple connotations or meaning. The first was of the shaven head, which represented a sannyasi, and when you shaved your hair, it represented a symbolic death, and to quote from his work, it implied, I have no ego and no place in your world. The second meaning was mated hair or jat, that is kept by the jogi, and it implied wildness and ascetic power. I am beyond your laws and live in the wildness of the spirit. So, the everyday mundane life made no sense to it, and therefore, they leave their trade, their family, their caste and community, and wander into the forest. The third meaning was of unshorn but combed hair, which is represented by Sikh, and this implied disciplined natural. By keeping the hair, that is nature, but using the comb, which is culture. So, this is basically theoretically doing away with the dichotomy of the nature and the culture. So, you have hair, you leave it on as it has come. You don't get it trimmed or you don't get it cut, but you don't kind of leave it uncontrolled as well. So, you discipline it with the help of a comb. So, the Sikh in this way signals that they accept the natural body as God given, but subject it to the orderly assumption of social responsibility. Uberoi notes that while most initiation focus on what you lose, your old name, your clothes, your hair, the Sikh initiation is almost entirely about what you gain. So, there is a transcendence from the negative to the positive, and therefore, it is a kind of considered as a battleground of freedom. It highlights a profound shift in religious philosophy. For the Jogi, the north or the mountain was the destination. For the Sikh, that is Anandpur or the city, and the Grihasth, the householder, are the destination. So, the kirpan is also kind of helping us to understand that the turban is a structural boundary. It is the ultimate structural inversion of the Jogi vow of non-violence. While the Jogi vows never to touch a weapon to remain pure, the Sikh is invested with a weapon to remain just. Holiness is no longer defined by passivity, but by the active protection of others. So, during the initiation rite, the Sikh is handed over the weapon, which is the kirpan, and as symbolic that he has now become responsible and would take care of his community. So, Uberoi notes that the turban serves as the final container for this logic. It encloses both the case and the kanga, acting as a physical boundary that keeps the natural hair from becoming the wild jat. It signifies a person who is spiritually free, that is the long hair, but socially anchored. So, the anchoring is from the comb and the turban. Uberoi argues that we cannot understand Sikhism or even Hinduism itself if we only look at caste. So, much of the understanding of Hinduism is in terms of understanding a caste as a social structure, and therefore, this particular essay by J.P.S. Uberoi helps us to understand the dialectic between the worldly householder and the renunciate. He points out that Hinduism is a balance of two opposing forces, which he describes as the warp and the woof as the social fabric, and it consists of a hierarchical rigid system determined by birth. This is the world of the householder, governed by the social obligations and ritual purity. The second world is the world of non-caste, that is the sannyas, a voluntaristic region where caste is abrogated. Through the door of the fourth ashram, that is renunciation, an individual dies to their caste and enters a religious order. Uberoi uses the word penumbral, that is the partially shaded outer region of a shadow, to describe the religious order, and the three orders that he is talking about is the sannyasi, the yogis, and the third is Sikhism. These orders existed outside the caste system but were essential to its stability. So, we look into the Sikh revolution as a structural collapse. The caste system provided the material support for the renunciant, while the renunciate provided the spiritual exist valve for the system. As the previous section of the text established, entering the non caste world required social death, shaving the head, discarding the name, and severing all ties. This is where author's argument reaches its peak. He is positioning Sikhism as a radical disruption of the warp and the woof. He argues that the five symbols are the physical manifestation of this collapse. By keeping the hair, that is the case, the Sikh claims the holiness of the sannyasi. By wearing the sword, that is the kirpan, they claim the political power of the kshatriya. By living as a householder, they stay within the normal world. The Sikh is in the world of caste, but not of it. They are in the world of renunciation, but not withdrawn from it. Uberoi addresses the ultimate sociological question: why did Sikhism survive as a distinct sovereign entity while the other movements were reabsorbed by the caste system? His answers lies in the annihilation of the partition. While other sects tried to find freedom by stepping outside the system, Sikhism found freedom by collapsing the system into a single point, that is, the individual Sikh. So, we look into the cycles of failure, which is the caste versus the non-caste, and here Uberoi notes that the most medieval movement followed a convoluted cycle. They began as a protest against caste, but eventually did the following. Number one, escaped into the wilderness. They became historic, quietist, and socially irrelevant. Second, they returned through the back door. They eventually settled down, married, and simply became a new caste within the Hindu fold, for example, the Sanyogi Jogis. But J.P. Uberoi argues that to understand the fighting Jogi or the Sannyasis' rebellion, we must see them as a group struggling with this cycle, trying to exert political power without a structural framework that allowed them to be both holy and worldly. The Sikhism is a new departure. Sikhism broke this cycle by refusing to acknowledge the traditional boundaries between the king or the Rajya, the monk or the sannyasi, and the citizen. Rather, all three can be found in one person at the same time. Instead of keeping the three as separate, Guru Gobind Singh merged them into the Sant Sipahi, which is a saint soldier. And therefore, Sikhism becomes a renunciation of renunciation. Uberoi defines the Sikh initiation as a mechanism that unlocks all dividing doors. By banning the act of taking alms, that is begging, the Guru cut the cord that kept the monk dependent on the caste householder. By replacing the world of celibacy with kachera, that is contingence with marriage, the Guru ensured the community would be self-sustaining and biologically grounded. By making all occupations, that is trade, soldiers, farming, open to the initiate, the Guru created a total human being who did not need to step outside society to find God. And therefore, we come to the final summary of the structured method, where the case or the hair is the anchor of the entire theory. It is the negation of the negation. The first negation, the monk saves his head to negate the world. The second negation, the Sikh refuses to save to negate the monk's negation. The result is a permanent state of renunciation within the world, a structural revolution that allowed the Sikh Panth to remain a battleground of freedom rather than a forgotten sect in the wilderness. He moves beyond the individual symbol to show how the 5Ks functions as a complete symmetrical system, a sign and a seal that defines a new kind of human existence. His arguments rest on the pairing of 5 symbols to represent 3 distinct yoga, the path of discipline, which were traditionally kept separate in the medieval world. Uberoi suggests that the 5 symbol plus 1 unstated physical state form a structural map of human experience. Each pair addresses a specific sphere of life that was previously fragmented. Uberoi's final thesis is that the Sikh symbol do not just represent different virtues, they affirm the unity of man's estate. Against fragmentation, in the medieval world, you were either a ruler or a priest or a monk, you could not be all three. The modern turn, by investing all these virtues in one body, Sikhism created a local human emancipation. This is why Uberoi claims that the birth of Khalsa marked the opening of modern period in Punjab. It replaced a fragmented hierarchical society with a sovereign integrated individual. So we come to the final reflection of his, and we look into the structural method he argued, where he looks into the ritual is grammar, the symbols are not random, they reflect a code, a human code. The inversion is the key. To understand Sikhism, you must see how they negate the monk and the worldly person. And the goal is sovereignty. The final meaning of remaining unshorn in the world is to claim the highest spiritual status without abandoning the responsibility of the citizen and the soldier. So, by looking into the way in which A.P.S. Uberoi provides a structural understanding of the five symbols of Sikhism, it helps us to have an alternative understanding of religion, not as a duality between the religious and a secular, but as a coexistence of the two. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.